Yeah. So Dr. Linda, how are you doing in these COVID times?
Oh my gosh, crazy.
Yeah.
I'm I'm good. I'm good. How are
Yeah.
you?
I'm all right. Things are kind of weird, but it's a weird time, that's for sure.
Most definitely. Yeah, I definitely feel like I'm very fortunate because a lot of what I can
Mhm.
do, I can still do remotely. So
Yeah.
definitely some people are impacted more than others. I work a lot with, professional dancers and
Right.
studio owners and performing
Hmm.
artists, and they're they can't perform, so that's really really tough. People that can do their job from a variety of
Hmm.
locations, they're obviously in better shape. So
Yeah.
it's highly variable, right?
Hmm.
uh,
This has got to be a weird time to be a doctor and to be someone who's, steeped in science, to hear so much misinformation going around. What are
oh
some
my,
of the things? What's it like being a doctor right now? And how do you manage some of that misinformation?
that's such a great question because you have limited bandwidth, limited time, and
Hmm.
so I see things that I so badly want to comment on, but I don't, because if I can't comment properly, I don't comment at all. So,
Right.
but I'm going to use one example that was discussed a lot in one of the international groups that I'm a part of. So there was a photo of a boy, sadly, who passed away from COVID,
Hmm.
and it says in the article, he's perfectly healthy, blah blah blah. But then they also talk about the fact that he was born like at 25 weeks, and clearly from the photo, you know, sadly, the kid is morbidly obese. So this is
Hmm.
not a perfectly healthy child. So it just, the headlines of things make me absolutely crazy because they want to induce fear. Everything is sensationalized, and
Hmm.
I mean, you know how statistics work. You can really
Yeah.
do a lot with statistics. You can manipulate them to prove your case in a lot of different scenarios. So it's very
Yeah.
very frustrating. It's very very hard. You know, some of the things that I saw early on, like they would show videos from a hospital in New York, for example, and I'd look at that and say, well, that could be just about any hospital on any given day that's really, really busy. Now, of
Hmm.
course, the part where they're taking people in ambulances and taking them to a different facility, that's not. But it's hard to gauge. So I belong to a couple of physician groups, which
Hmm.
have been really helpful because we talk more, we talk directly about what are we seeing, what experiences people are having, because people are located all over the world. So it's very helpful because it's
Yeah.
not the sensational,
Right.
media trying to grab it. And it's hard because I mean I get that, but at the same time, people don't know what to believe.
Yeah, I want to talk about that too because, as a journalist, at no
Right.
point are you really trained on like how to read science. And I probably fell into some of the traps that you're talking about early on. And it wasn't until I really started becoming really interested in science and studies and how they work when I actually started learning how to evaluate studies. And it's something I'm still, getting my feet wet on. But one thing I'll point out, this happened recently, and it was around, I believe it was around fermented foods and something that they prevent. I can't remember, but so I went to the story that someone posted, and they linked to the study. So then I looked at the study, and the study was a correlative study. So they were looking at, well, in these populations that also happen to eat fermented food, they also had this health outcome. And I said, well, that doesn't prove that's
Right.
like really the preliminary stage of what research would do. So it doesn't prove that that's the case. It says, well, this looks promising. We should do more research into that. Is that fair based on what you're hearing, that that's sort of the stages? And I wanted to ask too about like how you evaluate new research when you come across it.
Right. So there's definitely the saying correlation does not equal causation is really important to remember.
Yeah.
So you can do all kinds of, you know uh, ma- making this correlation, but right, that does not prove cause and effect. And nutrition type studies are notoriously difficult to do
Mm-hmm.
because do you remember everything you ate yesterday?
Right. Yeah.
I don't necessarily. So that can be really really challenging.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's hard to remember what you ate. That people who eat healthy foods tend to have other healthy behaviors, and
Right.
so and the opposite is true, of course. So it can be very
Mm-hmm.
very difficult, especially in those types of studies. The best types of studies
Yeah.
are randomized, controlled, double blind, and there's a placebo arm or there's like crossover. I mean, but those kind of studies are really hard to do. And it's challenging because, we are in this era of, limited resources. So, you need funding to do studies. So a lot of times the study is funded by, like if you're studying a drug, it's funded by the drug company. So
Yeah.
it's challenging. So one of the first things that I do when I'm trying to evaluate a study or a paper is I look for all the potential conflicts of interest. I look to see, what institution was it done at? What potential secondary gain might they have? Are they trying to prove something one way or another that's going to benefit them in some certain way?
Yeah, and how much weight do you put into that too? Because I mean, just because that doesn't necessarily mean that there was a problem with the study either.
Correct. Definitely. Yeah. Right. And that's just it. I look for these things just to have an eye out, but absolutely not. No, yeah, that's exactly right. And same thing with the drug companies. I get upset when people really just bash on drug companies because, it costs them a ton of money. R&D, research and development is extremely expensive. So.
Well, you can keep talking. I just went dark.
Okay.
I forgot this one does that.
Sure. So I should keep talking though?
Yeah, go ahead, keep talking.
Okay. So when people bash, pharmaceutical companies, it makes me really upset a lot of the time because, they really are hopefully trying to do the right thing and come up with new treatments. Right. And research and development is really, really expensive. And at some point they have to recoup that. And, they're going to put we want companies to continue to do the research and continue to develop new treatments. So therefore we have to think of the fact that that they are going to need to somehow make that work financially. I mean, they're, after all, they are a business. And so that's why, they have the patents for a certain period of time, et cetera. So it is challenging. And yes, just because they sponsored a study absolutely does not mean that it's not legitimate. It just means that, I look at it with that lens and make sure that I feel that it was done, properly. The study was designed well, and and I wish I could say that I was an expert statistician. I'm not. That's the other thing. Life has gotten so complicated these days, and ideally we would all have degrees in epidemiology and statistics, and because a lot of these studies are really complex. They're much more. The numbers you can crunch and everything has gotten more complex than it used to be.
And I guess to play off of that, like at what point do you actually make changes in your health behavior based on studies? How much data, or at what threshold does it say, okay, this is promising enough that I should try this, or I should make that change?
Right. So for me, the huge piece is, does it pass the common sense test?
Yeah, right.
So and in terms of risk benefits, so if something is relatively low risk, then I need a lot less evidence for it than if something is really high risk. So I take care of a lot of people that have connective tissue disorders, and a lot of these people are really, really suffering. And I hear people say all the time, well, but that's not like a proven treatment for that condition, or that's not something that has FDA has been FDA approved. Physicians prescribe tons and tons and tons of things that don't have FDA approval. Once a drug has been approved for a certain indication, the company doesn't usually go back and try to get FDA approval for other indications, because that's our job as physicians, is to know, it works for this, and there's been studies showing that drug works for these other conditions, so therefore I can prescribe it for those other conditions. So it's knowing what makes sense, what the risks are of a given treatment, or, I'm super into nutrition. So, I'm not going to go and eat, 6 pounds of Brussels sprouts every day. Moderation is also really important.
Yeah.
But if something seems reasonable and seems like that, makes sense, and then, you can kind of follow like the pathways and things. Okay, that seems like that would be logical. Then I would go ahead and make the change and not necessarily wait for all kinds of studies. For example, with this whole COVID situation, there's lots of nutritional things that we can do. There's lots of things that can be done with supplements that are that are potentially beneficial because they've been shown in studies with other viruses to be beneficial.
Right.
And there's no one company that makes vitamin C, right? So
yeah, right, exactly.
it's not like the studies are, funded by the vitamin C industry.
Yeah, right, exactly. Yeah, and one of the things I thought was interesting that I've picked up from the Stronger by Science podcast, something that they talk about that I guess I sort of thought about, but not really very explicitly, is they talk a lot about the cost benefit of analysis. It's not just like, does this particular supplement work as it's supposed to, or doesn't it? But it's like how much benefit are you getting versus how much it's actually going to cost you. And, a lot of these supplements aren't cheap. And if you took everything that had even a minor amount of benefit to you, you'd go broke buying all these all these things.
Exactly.
For example, like creatine has an enormous range of benefits, and so it's probably worth the expense of buying creatine supplements. It goes well beyond muscle building, but just general health markers. It been shown to improve a lot of different things. But then there's stuff like beetroot juice that is promising, but how much versus like how much are you paying for the supplement, or you're just eating beetroot juice, I guess is fine. But is that something that you take into account too when you make these decisions?
Oh, definitely. I should have been more specific about risk benefit. With that does more specifically imply the side effects of the treatment versus the potential benefits. But you're right; it should be the whole thing: the cost, how accessible it is, we don't want to over medicalize is kind of a term that I think is really relevant. We don't want people feeling like they have to be taking all kinds of supplements all day long, and their life starts to revolve around, oh, I better make sure that I go buy more of this, and it's a balance, and at the end of the day, if we're not eating well, then it doesn't matter. The other things that we do are really not going to have that much of an impact. Right. So it's the food that we eat that is most important. It's I like to say there's never been a better time to get healthy than right now.
Yeah, right.
It's the best possible time to lower your inflammation and get those good nutrients into your body, because the rewards will be in the short term and in the long term.
I'm glad you brought up inflammation too, because I feel like that's another topic that gets misunderstood a lot. Inflammation, acute inflammation, is sort of something that's a natural part of our body. When you exercise, you become inflamed, but it's chronic inflammation that we're really concerned about. And can you kind of talk a little bit about the difference between the two?
Definitely. So acute inflammation, if you go and you sprain your ankle, and then you'll see that it gets inflamed afterwards. That's a normal part of the healing process, and all the white blood cells are going to go to the area, and they're going to be clearing out the debris, and you're going to get the swelling. If you have surgery, things after there's been trauma, there is acute inflammation, and that's an important part of the healing process. So acute inflammation is okay. But the chronic inflammation is what is really a problem. And we are absolutely in a health crisis of chronic inflammation. At the end of the day, most of the things that are really, impacting society in a big way are inflammatory disorders: heart disease, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, cerebral vascular disease, lots and lots of strokes, that are caused by cerebral vascular disease. Lots and lots of things are related to inflammation. So it's something that we definitely want to get better control of. If we get a lot of, especially fat around our abdomen, if we get that, apple shape, that is very, very pro-inflammatory. Adipose tissue is pro-inflammatory. So it kind of creates this vicious cycle. Yeah. So, and it makes it very hard, because then it's hard to exercise because we hurt. And so lowering inflammation, really, I like for people not to focus so much on the number on the scale, but getting the nutrients in the body that we need, because a lot of I have patients on both ends of the spectrum. I have patients that are underweight, as well as ones that are above their ideal body weight. Right. And we want to make sure that we're getting their ideal nutrients into the body without getting things into the body that increase chronic inflammation. If you think about it, our ancestors it's not that many generations that you have to go back that they were not eating
Mm-hmm.
the kind of sugar that we're eating, sugar and white flour and preservatives and all of these things that, they were not exposed to.
Right. What do you think about all these health documentaries that are coming out lately? Some of them have some pretty dubious science behind them. Are you watching these when they come out? And what are your general reactions? How do you keep yourself from like tearing out the couch some stuffings or when you're watching?
That's actually a funny question, because I was watching Grey's Anatomy once, and I'm an anesthesiologist, as you obviously know, but I don't know how many of your viewers would know.
Uh-huh.
So I was watching an episode of Grey's Anatomy once, and they started talking about malignant hyperthermia and how about it being an allergy. And I remember I was on the treadmill at the time, and I wanted to punch the TV. I was so mad. And that's not a documentary, but a lot of people, they watch these shows that seem close enough to real life that they think that they're learning something. And I do the same thing. If I watch a show that's about, the legal system or something, I'm sure I'm coming away from there thinking that I gained some knowledge that may be completely false, but that's not my area of expertise. So I don't know that. So I definitely worry about the subconscious messages that we're getting in all kinds of programming that now spans the, completely, unrealistic to it's a documentary, but who's fact checking, and then there's a lot of people that come away from those things thinking that these are absolute truths, so that's very, very challenging. I struggle with that.
I think that's the problem. Is I don't think anyone is fact checking, or though a lot of I've been watching a lot of fact checks on different various documentaries that come out. I'm more interested in the fact checks than the actual documentary. But the one about the vegan athletes, I can't remember which. Was it What the Health, or was it something else? I can't remember what the most recent one was.
I'm not sure. I don't think I saw that one.
But it was the one. It was on Netflix, I guess. And the guy was basically trying to make the claim that, and he was following some UFC fighters and some other athletes that a vegan diet was better for you for athletics than a straight up meat diet. And the thing is, it uses so many claims that were completely untrue. It even the way it painted it, it was talking about how one of the fighters that they highlighted was vegan and it beat this other fighter that wasn't vegan. Well, first off, it was a rematch, and he had lost the first time, so you couldn't really say that it made him bet. He won one, lost one.
Right.
Secondly, he wasn't actually vegan. He was only vegan when he was in his training camp. So outside of that, he was eating meat. So it's like just those little facts alone. And that wasn't even getting into the science parts, which were just, they were all over the place. It just made some really terrible claims, drew conclusions from correlation studies. It went back to, and the funny thing was, so I've looked at the data, I've looked at the research, the meta-analysis on protein sources. And bar none, whey protein is like the king of protein sources. You just can't beat it. And they've done studies where they've even they've taken all the protein sources from plants and from other things and equated them for the various contents, like to make sure they all had the same amount of leucine and other amino acids like that. Even taking those amounts and equating them, meaning you're taking in far more protein to make sure those amounts are equated, whey protein still did better. Now, if the documentary had said, is it possible to be an athlete, to be a pro athlete on a vegan diet, they'd probably be safe in making those claims.
Right.
That's reasonable. Yes, you can. Is it optimal? Right. That's another question. And I think that they made some very dubious claims in claiming that was something that you could actually do.
Yeah, that's exactly the problem, is that whether it's a TV show or somebody, writing an article, or a blog, or, the people who are making the more sensational claims in general are getting more attention. So that's the challenging thing, sticking to the science, and, it's not as sexy in general,
It doesn't, no. It's too bad.
Yeah, and there's no one diet that works for everyone. So that's the other, challenging thing about that. But yeah, I definitely struggle with it, and it doesn't have to be limited to science by any means. This whole based on a true story. I
Mhm.
wonder about history, for example. How many of us are watching things that are based on a true story that are historical, and then we believe that what we just watched is actually the truth, and read about incidents that happen, and we no longer believe that because we believe what we just saw. So I feel like we are definitely in this kind of weird era in terms of all of the
Yeah.
documentaries and docu-series or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like a lot of these documentaries, I mean, they clearly start with, they have something that they want to prove. Like they're starting with a bias, and then they're trying to find ways to support that viewpoint versus like, an actual detached look at the subject. Yeah, it's like one of my friends said, like you'll never see an infomercial for a balanced diet, like because there's nothing to
Right,
sell.
right,
There's nothing to sell unless you're selling like a nutrition plan, I guess. But no one wants to hear that. Yeah, you have to exercise and eat a balanced diet, and if you want to lose weight, you have to consume fewer calories than you take in,
right,
or that you
right.
burn it
It's
rather.
like it's like there's not a, well, maybe there is a broccoli industry, I don't know, but
Yeah.
they wouldn't have tons and tons of money to be taking out ads again. No one food is
Mhm.
the perfect food for everyone, but yeah, a balanced diet, that's exactly right.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
Yeah.
what are some tips that you generally have for people? What are some, like, a few things that you might train people to, like, if like via people coming to your clinic? I know you've trained people to eat healthier, engage in other health seeking activities. What are some of those that you recommend?
So, I do pain management, integrative pain management. And
Hmm.
so I start with looking at a whole bunch of lifestyle factors. So if people are smoking, obviously quitting smoking is really important. There
Yeah.
is a high correlation between smoking and chronic pain.
Right.
So I start with that, and it's not just smoking, but it's
Hmm.
also vaping. That's also not good for you, especially now with coronavirus. So there are some people that think, oh, I'm just vaping, it's okay. That's not good for your lungs either, and that also increases inflammation. So you want to stay away from both of those things, and really you don't want to be exposing yourself to a lot of smoke, even from your barbecue or something like that. I mean, none of us need to be breathing in a lot of smoke. So that's kind of the first thing that I start with, because
Hmm.
some things are absolute black and white, like sugar. Sugar
Yeah.
is not good for any of us. Not that I don't eat sugar, I do. But again, in moderation, and very, very small amounts, and be very, very choosy about it. Is the other thing
Right.
that I advise my patients. Pick your treats or whatever very, very carefully. Make sure that it's really, 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 really good, and just have a couple of bites.
Hmm.
So starting with the things that are really, really clear cut. And then in terms of like things like soda, that's a big no-no. I don't
Yeah.
like any kind of soda, whether it's regular or decaf, or sugar
Yeah.
free. That's not good.
Yeah.
Sparkling water with a little like natural flavor, that's
Hmm.
fine. But so I talk a lot about those kind of things. I'm not a
Yes.
fan of fruit juice.
No.
Now tart cherry juice might be one like, especially if you're going to mix in your college powder or something like that. But otherwise, I'm
Mhm.
not a fan of juice. So we talk about eliminating that. So
So
I start kind of with,
no
I'm thinking
drinking
about in
Capri
terms
Sun
of,
all day.
right, right. No drinking Capri Sun all day. Energy drinks. A lot of my patients have
Right.
fatigue, and so they'll be drinking energy drinks, and
Mhm.
that's not something that I'm a fan of. So we try to eliminate that. And a lot of
Mhm.
my patients also are very sensitive to dairy, and dairy can be pro-inflammatory. So um, I often will recommend that they try, eliminating dairy for a period of time, and then see how you feel, and then you reintroduce it
Mhm.
and see how that goes.
Yeah.
Like I said, everyone is different in terms of how they respond to different therapies.
Mhm.
So starting with those groups. And then the other thing that I really talk a lot about is gluten. So
Hmm.
even if people have been tested for gluten and they don't have the celiac antibodies, they could be
Mhm.
gluten sensitive, meaning that they produce more inflammation when they're exposed to gluten. So sometimes they can try going gluten-free for a period of, I usually recommend a minimum of 4 weeks, because it can be hard to really tell. And then after that, you can do a test, and you can reintroduce a small amount of gluten and see if it seems like it, makes you hurt more. And a lot of times people say, gosh, my celiac test was completely normal, but I did go gluten free, and now I feel much better off of gluten. So they just keep it out of their diet. I'm not a big fan of restricting people, but that's where I kind of introduce the concepts to them of, you become your best researcher, and do it with a curious mindset and not an anxious mindset, because that's another really important thing. If you get really overly anxious about it, then you're defeating the purpose.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, so you want to make sure that you're kind of exploring all of these things and seeing, well, when do I feel the best? And now that I've been, it wasn't that long ago that I didn't eat anywhere near as healthy as I do now. And yeah, I definitely I'll eat sweets from time to time, or a small amount of something. If I were to go and eat, like I used to eat a couple of donuts at a time, I know I would feel so sick if I did that right now. Once you get used to eating a certain way, you really, and same thing with like, if I were to eat some kind of super rich sauce that I don't eat anymore, like I just wouldn't feel good. So I think that's another important thing to realize, is that sometimes it's the first couple of weeks that are the hardest while your body is getting used to something. So in general, I do agree that vegan diets can be actually really, really harmful. But we want to think about plants as being really good for our bodies. So
for sure.
Because a vegan diet does not equal a plant-based diet. Vegan diet can be, a vegan. I had a patient who I saw who was she was vegan, and I said, oh, okay, so what do you eat for breakfast? Captain Crunch cereal. What do you eat for lunch? Captain Crunch cereal. And then I forget what she ate for dinner. But I was like, wow, that's a really unhealthy vegan diet. So, vegan and plant-based are not the same thing, but plants have a lot of wonderful properties, a lot of anti-inflammatory properties, especially things like beans, other vegetables that are colorful all the way through. Like you mentioned beets earlier. Beets have a lot of really wonderful properties. Both beets and arugula are rich in nitric oxide, so they help deliver blood flow to the tissues and help dilate blood vessels and improve blood flow. So there are a lot of different plants that have lots of benefits for us. So, I kind of go through step by step. And then a lot of my patients too, I talk to them about their sleep. And when they say they have difficulty sleeping, I say, okay, so what do you do when you wake up in the middle of the night and you can't sleep? Well, I go downstairs and have a bowl of ice cream. Let's talk about that. Going downstairs and having a bowl of ice cream in the middle of the night is not a good idea. You got to turn on the lights, and/or you get the light from the refrigerator or the freezer. So I also talked to them about time-restricted feeding. So if you can go, even 12 hours, but even cut out that part, because I think you can probably hear that. Can you hear that or no?
No.
Okay, it's hard for me to know what you can and can't hear since I'm outside, but like a plane just went overhead. Okay, so a lot of people get up in the middle of the night and they end up doing things that are making really poor choices. So I have some patients that'll get up in the middle of the night and they'll eat a bowl of ice cream when they can't sleep, and so you're raising your blood sugar, and it's you're doing it in our bodies do a lot of cleaning up and kind of clearing out cells, senescent cells, when we are in a fasting state. So our ancestors used to go probably days without eating, because they had to catch what they ate, right? So but if we even go 12, 16 hours in between meals, that can be very beneficial. And I've had a lot of patients who I've talked to them about time restricted feeding. I've given them some instructions about that, and they've successfully not only lost some weight when they needed to, but they also say it's really helped their pain a lot, and it's actually lowered their inflammatory markers. We do repeat inflammatory markers, and they're improved.
Yeah, I've been doing that I heard.
Yeah.
I've been doing time restricted eating for quite some time. And once in a while something will happen and I'll go off of it, but for the most part it's been I feel a lot better when I do it than when I don't.
Yeah, I didn't used to really pay that much attention to that, but then you introduced me to Rhonda Patrick's podcast. She's fabulous. And it really made a lot of sense. I started listening to, a lot of her episodes, Walter Longo, looking into
Hmm.
his research in cancer patients. And yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense. And I've had a lot of patients really do well with that.
Yeah, I think it's, for me, I feel like it's helped me probably restrict the amount of calories I eat without actually having to measure it. As long as
Right,
I'm also going between meals and not snacking between meals, that's a big one that can add up the calories too. But
right,
I feel like my body has time to like clear stuff out, and it may sound a little gross, but you're like actually letting things pass through instead of constantly loading things
right,
into it, and it just feels better. So I'm a pretty
right.
big fan of it. I tend to eat between, I'll start at like 10 to 10:30 in the morning. I'll have a shake to start off the day, some whey protein and greens and other things in there, and then I'll probably eat the last thing, usually some yogurt with some nuts and maybe a little dark chocolate at like 8 or 8:30, and then I call it a day. So it's anywhere between it's about a 12, 13 hour window that I'm going without eating. I feel a lot better when I do it.
Hmm. Yeah, I notice myself, I feel more sluggish if I had eaten later in the evening. When I wake up the next morning, I feel more sluggish. So
Mm-hmm.
I definitely do think it makes a big difference, and it does make it easier to control your weight. And I never liked the idea of, I can't eat this, I can't, if you focus
Mm-hmm.
more on the time restricted feeding and on these are foods that are healthy for me, and we've kind of lost the connection between
Mm-hmm.
food and nutrition in some
Yeah.
regards. When people think of nutrition, I think they often think of, I have to go on a diet and I can't eat this and I can't eat this. Food, we need food to nourish ourselves,
Yeah.
and so I think if
Mm-hmm.
we think of, I need these certain nutrients, it
Yeah.
makes it easier to not overdo it on the things that we shouldn't be eating, because we're kind of get relatively full on the good stuff that our bodies need.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard people say too, like, I used to love donuts, and I've heard people say, I love donuts, but donuts don't love me. So
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Did you see a big difference in your nutrition? Now, you used to be a ballet dancer, right? And did you
Mm-hmm.
see, was there a
Yeah.
specific type of nutrition that you had to follow for that? And did it change after you stopped being a ballet dancer or wasn't doing it as much, or however you'd want to?
Well, you may or may not like the answer to this question.
I'm just curious.
Yeah, no. So when I was in
Hmm.
high school and very, very serious in ballet, and I
Yeah.
and I wanted to be a professional ballerina. I mean, that was my goal.
Hmm.
But I didn't know anything about nutrition, and I would stop, because I walked from my high school to the ballet school, and I would stop and get a donut.
Yeah.
Literally, I stopped and get an apple fritter on the way, and
Nice.
then I would starve myself, because of course I took in so many calories, and they're empty calories. They just rate, your blood sugar spikes, of course,
Hmm.
and then you feel terrible afterwards. There's no
Yeah.
energy. Um, but I didn't know anything about nutrition. I didn't understand that what I
Hmm.
was doing to my body was just, really terrible. And I wouldn't say I struggled with my weight, but I was heavier
Hmm.
than, for ballet. Normally the
Yeah.
ideal physique is a lot thinner. And then when I went off to college, and I kind of gained the freshman 15, and then my sophomore year, I started losing a lot of weight. I got much more serious. That's kind of when I started getting more into nutrition. And at one
Hmm.
point I was kind of underweight, actually.
Oh.
And a lot of people were very, concerned about me. So I mean, I have struggled with some issues eating in the past, and
Hmm.
achieving that balance. But now for many, many years, I've been able to have that balance once I really understood that, don't worry about the number on the scale. I literally spent not the first, but I guess I spent probably a period of maybe 20 years of weighing myself every single day. I never weigh
Wow.
myself now. I never weigh myself. I'm going to go to the doctor, then they weigh me. But otherwise, I
Hmm.
don't weigh myself, because it's much more about how do I feel, and,
Hmm.
how do my clothes feel. And, you get a pretty good idea of
Right.
where you're at. And, I realize now that I don't want to be underweight. I need
Hmm.
that nutrition in my body. And back then when I was dancing a lot, I was not eating healthy. I really wasn't. And I was not
Hmm.
doing my body any favors. I got injured a lot. And I think that if I had eaten better, I probably could have avoided some of those injuries, or at least would have improved my odds.
So I think that's a great answer because I think that probably will inspire people. A lot of people have struggled with different eating issues, and to know that you are now pretty super healthy and that you once struggled with those things too, I think maybe maybe lets other people feel like they can do it too.
And culturally, it was really interesting because I went to UC Irvine, which is a very serious, conservatory style ballet program,
Yeah.
and I was getting a lot of positive reinforcement from my ballet instructors, and they would say, wow, Linda, you look so great. You've lost so much weight, and they would say these things in the middle of class in front of all these people. Wow, doesn't Linda look good? And meanwhile, I was, so then that just makes you want to
Reinforces it.
do it. Exactly. It reinforces it. So,
Yeah.
I went through a period where, I was in double digits and was, I was quite thin and not eating, so yeah, it's definitely important to learn how to get the
Yeah.
right food into your body, because we need it, and it's
Right.
ironic with dance, especially because you can't dance well if you're not getting the nutrition that your body needs. So I definitely have had people all over the map. I've had lots of dancers that have struggled with eating disorders, and I stress that to them, that your cells need the B vitamins and the C vitamin, vitamin C, and all of these, really selenium and magnesium and all these super important minerals, all the vitamins and minerals that come from our foods,
Cool.
amino acids, etc.
Well, I think that's a cool story, and I think it really helps people. I think it will really help people to hear that. I think that's important. And I wonder now if we're examining a lot of these practices that were kind of taken for granted a long time ago, wrestling, and that's another whole one with the dramatic weight cuts. And, at least at like the level of like the UFC, that's starting to be questioned. Some fighters are going up in weight because they're realizing they're not as depleted, and they can be stronger at those heavier weights than when they try to trim down to the really low ones. So yeah, that's a good point to make. Well, anything else, Linda, anything else that you'd like to leave with our listeners today?
I think the other thing that I would like to mention is that it's important to be kind to ourselves and to be forgiving of ourselves, because I think a lot of times, we think about these lifestyle type changes that we can make, and then if we do get sick, we might blame ourselves, and it's important not to do that, because there's a lot of things that we can control. We can't control everything, and we each have our own genetic makeup that yes, we can. I've heard it described like it's not like a brake where it's either on or off, but it's more like an accelerator pedal. Epigenetics, I'm thinking of, right? So food, environment, these kind of things, they can influence our genetic makeup, but at the end of the day, we can't control everything. So we want to watch what we eat. We want to make sure that we're getting good quality sleep. And then the other thing that we didn't talk about that I wanted to just mention really quickly is managing stress.
Oh yeah.
Because I think a lot of people don't realize that what we think actually truly influences the physiology of our bodies. And so it's mind and the body are not separate. When people start talking about the mind-body connection, I think it's kind of interesting because, they're really one and the same. It's not like they're just kind of like one's over here, and they're kind of loosely connected. Like it's all one thing, really.
Right.
And so when we think certain thoughts, it has physiologic effects that then can cycle back to up to the brain. And if you think about it, at the end of the day, we sense everything in our brain. So it's hugely important. And when we think certain thoughts, it makes that more likely to happen. So neuroplasticity is a super important concept to understand. We used to think that, once we became adults, our brains didn't change anymore, but they change a lot. So every big decision is made up of a bunch of small decisions. So I think that just, to remember that, just try to make more and more small, good decisions is very helpful for us. Yeah.
Yeah. I like to say, you might have to lose a battle once in a while, just win the war. So
yeah, exactly.
If one night you come up short and you have to go down and get that bowl of ice cream, well, don't do it every night. Just just say, okay, it happened, move on, not going to do it tonight, so.
And life is short. And, so if it makes you happy to have, a little bit of ice cream, and, you do it, I don't know, whatever the frequency is for you, that, again, depending on your own personal circumstances, but nobody benefits from having a massive bowl of ice cream every night. That's just not healthy for any of us. So
exactly. Well, Dr. Linda Bluestein, anything, how would you like people follow you? I know you have a podcast now.
Right, right. So my podcast is called Bendy Bodies with the Hypermobility MD. And yeah, so I would love for people to tune into that. And I also have a YouTube channel, and that is also Bendy Bodies.
Nice.
And I also have a website, which is hypermobilitymd.com. And I do virtual visits now, and I can see patients from a very large number of states in the United States. It changes, of
Nice.
course, with COVID, depending on
Mm-hmm.
the various different guidelines and things. So if
Yeah.
if you're interested, I try to provide the whole range of, here's some free information on the podcast, all the way to, you want individual care, then hop on the portal and sign up to become a patient. So, and then all kinds of things in between. So
Cool, cool. Well, you know the routine. I have all my guests end the podcast by saying keep it awesome. So keep it awesome, Linda.
keep it awesome.
All right.
Keep it awesome. It was great to see you.
Good to see you. Bye, everyone. Let's see.
Bye bye.